The legacy of Deborah, an icon of courage, faith, and victory. Our story begins in the ancient land of Israel, long before the rise of kings and empires. It was a time when the very heart of the nation was tested, and its future appeared uncertain. This was the era known as the time of the Judges, marked by a repeating cycle of faith and apostasy, repentance and deliverance. But amidst the chaos, there arose a figure who would challenge societal norms and break through the barriers of her time. Deborah, the only female judge of Israel, would lead her people to freedom, becoming an enduring symbol of courage, wisdom, and faith. Israel at the edge of collapse, a time of judges and turmoil. Imagine a society in turmoil, its people fractured, their values shaken, and their enemies closing in. The era following the death of Joshua was marked by disunity and vulnerability. In the absence of strong, centralized leadership, the 12 tribes of Israel faced repeated threats from surrounding nations. The Book of Judges, one of the oldest and most revered texts in Israelite history, describes these years as a time of great instability. Without a king, everyone did what was right in their own eyes, resulting in a society deeply fragmented and vulnerable to external threats. The Israelites' troubles often stemmed from turning away from the faith that had once united them. Influenced by neighboring Canaanite cultures, they began to worship other gods, neglecting the covenant that had been their foundation. This abandonment of their spiritual heritage left them weakened, divided, and at the mercy of enemies who seemed both more powerful and more organized. A cycle of apostasy, oppression, and deliverance. During this era, Israel was caught in a seemingly endless cycle. They would fall into idolatry, then suffer under foreign powers until they cried out in repentance, and finally, God would raise up a judge, a leader who would guide them back to faith and, often, deliver them from oppression. Judges were not kings. They were chosen leaders, warriors, and prophets, called to inspire the people, restore their faith, and lead them to freedom. And among these judges, Deborah stood out not only as a political and military leader, but also as a prophetess, respected by both men and women alike. The rise of Deborah, a unique judge in Israel's history. In this male-dominated society, the emergence of a female judge was astonishing. Deborah's role defied the conventions of her time, and yet, she was embraced as a leader. Known for her deep spiritual insight, Deborah's judgment was trusted by all who came to seek her counsel. Her wisdom was unparalleled, and she held court beneath a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel, a location that became known as the Palm of Deborah. It was here that people from across the land would come to have their disputes settled, trusting her not only for her wisdom but for her deep connection to God. Deborah's role as both judge and prophetess made her unique. In her, the people found not only legal and administrative leadership but also spiritual guidance. She represented a direct link to the divine, a voice of prophecy in a time when the people had strayed far from their covenant. Her dual role allowed her to restore both justice and faith among the Israelites. The plight of Israel under Canaanite oppression. Israel's predicament was grim. For 2 decades, they had been oppressed by King Jabin of Canaan, whose military commander, Sisera, commanded an imposing force. Sisera's army boasted 900 iron chariots, a terrifying and seemingly insurmountable force on the battlefield. These iron chariots represented the cutting edge of military technology in the ancient world, able to mow down infantry and crush any who stood in their way. For Israel, who fought mostly on foot and lacked such advanced weaponry, Sisera's chariots were a source of constant dread. Sisera's oppressive rule extended beyond the battlefield. Under his command, the Israelites endured heavy taxes, limited freedom, and, perhaps, forced labor. The Canaanite oppression was all-encompassing, touching every aspect of life and leaving the Israelites feeling abandoned, broken, and hopeless. Many must have questioned whether God had forsaken them, wondering if they would ever see a return to the freedom they once enjoyed. Deborah's call to action, the divine plan for liberation. It was in the midst of this despair that Deborah received a divine message. She was told to summon a man named Barak, a respected warrior from the tribe of Naphtali. Barak was to lead an army of 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun to Mount Tabor, a strategic high ground from which they could potentially launch an attack on Sisera's forces. God's promise was clear. Sisera and his mighty army would be delivered into Barak's hands. When Deborah called Barak to lead Israel into battle, he hesitated. Barak's reluctance stemmed from a very human fear of the formidable Canaanite army, particularly Sisera's invincible iron chariots. Yet Barak was also wise. He recognized the strength and significance of Deborah's leadership. He told her, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go." His response, often viewed as a sign of doubt, can also be seen as a recognition of Deborah's role as both spiritual guide and leader. With Deborah by his side, he believed the army would be encouraged, knowing that God was with them. The gathering of Israel's army, faith and determination. Agreeing to join Barak, Deborah reminded him of God's promise, but also foretold that the glory of victory would not go to him but to a woman. As word of the gathering forces spread, 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun assembled at Mount Tabor, ready to face Sisera's seemingly invincible army. For these men, the sight of Deborah, a prophetess, judge, and leader, must have been a profound source of inspiration. Her presence on the battlefield represented divine support, and her courage reinforced their resolve. The battlefield strategy, Mount Tabor and the Kishon River. Mount Tabor was not chosen at random. This mountain, rising prominently in northern Israel, offered a strategic vantage point over the Jezreel Valley, a broad and fertile plain stretching between the mountains and the coast. The valley was a natural corridor for armies, making it a prime location for conflict throughout ancient history. From the top of Mount Tabor, Israel's army could see for miles, giving them a critical advantage over their enemies. The plan was carefully devised. Deborah had been given insight into God's strategy. Sisera and his army would be lured to the Kishon River, a location where natural conditions would soon turn the tide of battle. The river itself was generally calm, but during seasonal rains, it could become a swift torrent. This geographical feature would prove instrumental in the coming battle, leveling the playing field and neutralizing Sisera's advantage. Sisera mobilizes his army, the power of iron chariots. News of the Israelite mobilization reached Sisera, who wasted no time gathering his formidable forces. Confident in the superiority of his iron chariots, he anticipated an easy victory. These chariots, symbols of Canaanite power and technological prowess, were unlike anything Israel could match. For years, the sight of these chariots had struck terror into the hearts of the Israelites. With these war machines, Sisera intended to crush the rebellion swiftly and decisively. As Sisera's chariots rumbled across the valley, the earth shook beneath their weight. The Canaanite army was formidable, a well-oiled military machine ready to sweep over the Israelites. Sisera's confidence was unshaken, bolstered by years of victory. He could not have imagined that this day would end any differently. Divine intervention at the Battle of Kishon. Nature joins the fight. At Deborah's command, Barak led his troops down Mount Tabor, charging towards Sisera's forces in the valley below. As they advanced, a powerful storm swept over the region, and the Kishon River began to swell. Torrential rains turned the valley floor into a muddy quagmire, and Sisera's chariots became bogged down in the thick, sticky mud. Horses strained and struggled, and the once feared chariots, symbols of invincibility, were rendered useless. The Israelite foot soldiers, unencumbered by heavy equipment, moved easily across the muddy terrain, taking full advantage of Sisera's plight. What had once been an army of iron and power was now vulnerable, trapped by forces beyond their control. The Israelites surged forward with renewed vigor, driven by the unmistakable signs of divine intervention. For Sisera and his men, the battle was nothing short of a nightmare, as they were overwhelmed by both the elements and the Israelite warriors. The decisive pursuit, Barak's relentless drive to victory. Realizing the battle was lost, Sisera abandoned his chariot and fled on foot, leaving his men behind to face the Israelites alone. Barak's forces pressed forward, determined to secure a complete and final victory. They pursued the Canaanites all the way back to Harosheth Hagoyim, ensuring that not a single soldier survived. The victory was absolute, a feat that would have been unthinkable had it not been for the combination of strategic foresight, courage, and divine intervention. This victory was more than a military triumph. It marked the end of a 20-year oppression, a profound liberation for a people who had known only suffering and subjugation. It also demonstrated the power of faith and obedience, showing that when Israel trusted in God, no force, however formidable, could stand against them. Sisera's final moments. The unlikely heroine, Jael. Meanwhile, Sisera, weary and desperate, found himself far from the battlefield and at the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. He believed he had found refuge, for the Kenite were neutral in the conflict, maintaining peaceful relations with both Israel and Canaan. Jael welcomed him into her tent, offering him milk instead of the water he requested, a gesture that must have put him at ease. As Sisera fell into a deep sleep, Jael took action. Grasping a tent peg and a hammer, she approached him silently and drove the peg through his temple, ending his life instantly. This act of courage and decisiveness by Jael fulfilled Deborah's prophecy that a woman would claim the ultimate victory. Sisera's death marked the final blow to Canaanite oppression and solidified Israel's freedom. The Song of Deborah, a celebration of courage and faith. Following the victory, Deborah and Barak composed a song, one of the most ancient pieces of Hebrew poetry, celebrating the triumph and the divine intervention that had led to Israel's freedom. Known as the Song of Deborah, it recounts the events with vivid imagery, praising those who fought and calling out those who did not answer the call. The song reflects on the cosmic nature of the battle, suggesting that the very stars fought against Sisera. Jael is hailed as a heroine, most blessed of women, for her role in Sisera's defeat. The song also poignantly imagines Sisera's mother waiting in vain for her son's return, a haunting reminder of the price of oppression and violence. Deborah's legacy, an enduring symbol of strength. The victory ushered in a rare period of peace for Israel, lasting 40 years. Deborah's leadership had united the people, restored their faith, and delivered them from oppression. Her story became a beacon of hope, demonstrating that true leadership is rooted in faith, wisdom, and courage. Deborah's life defied expectations, inspiring generations and reminding us that with faith, the impossible becomes possible. If this story has inspired you, be sure to subscribe. Join us for more journeys into the powerful narratives that continue to shape our understanding of courage, faith, and resilience. Share this story with friends and family to keep Deborah's legacy alive, and together, let's draw strength from these timeless lessons. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing more with you soon.